Hey everyone, I'm Matt,
And this is Lucas,
and this is Thanks for Playing.
the podcast where we break down the most iconic video games the medium has to offer.
Oh!
What's going on, Matt?
Dude, I'm chilling. I've recently added podcaster to my Tinder bio,
You told me.
and it's yielding results.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
mixed reactions, once they hear this beautiful content, but mostly positive. So,
Has anybody asked you for the podcast?
one or two.
Have our downloads gone up?
We're doing business is booming, Lucas.
Did we go from our 10K to our 15K yet?
We
goals, or-
we have hit 20K.
Alright.
The sponsors are rolling in. It's phenomenal. It's juicy. That's the word I'd use.
Dude. So that's awesome. I love that. I actually should probably do that and see if I yield results. Right now, I'm the control group for not getting podcast for not having podcast
we're,
hosts.
we're doing this scientifically.
Did yours say podcaster or podcast host?
Podcast host. Podcaster sounds like a normie,
Okay.
and I know you have that shit in your LinkedIn.
Yeah. No, I changed it. It says podcast host.
Your
on
header
LinkedIn.
still says podcaster.
But-
You need to fix it.
Oh, it does. Oh
Yeah.
shit. Okay, I'll change that. But okay, I will add podcast host on the Tinder and the Bumbles and see
dude.
see if it yields results. Yeah, we'll do that. Dude, have you seen the Netflix documentary High Score?
I have not, but I've heard good things.
This is a big recommendation for anybody out there that is into video games, and you probably are if you're listening to this podcast. There is a Netflix documentary called High Score, and it covers. I've watched 2 episodes. It covers the video game industry from like a very early on. So it's like Atari, it's like early Nintendo and stuff. I think it even cuts off like at 93 or 94.
So
right?
it's
So it
like the
doesn't go-
theatrical version of Console Wars.
I guess, yeah, Console Wars. I haven't read that one, but I know that's.
I
You're
started
reading
it. It's
You're reading it.
haven't finished it. It's in this room.
So there's a
Somewhere.
quick story I think that you would really appreciate that's in High Score. It's for some reason it felt like a Matt moment when I was watching it. So basically back in like the 80s when the NES was huge, right? And everybody had an NES in their family room. There was a hotline that you can call, the Nintendo hotline. It had like 40 people at a call center, probably more. And these were game masters. These were Nintendo employees that knew the ins and outs of Zelda,
Oh,
Mario.
yeah, they talked about
like,
that in my book a
everything.
little bit actually.
Yeah, and it was the most interesting job because you just knew video games at that time. And knowing there was no internet, there was no way to look up a cheat code, right? So you just called the 1-800 hotline. It was like $1 a minute, $2 a minute.
Oh,
So
for real?
kids
Man.
were just running up the
That's
phone bill.
expensive as hell though.
Yeah, it was. And there was a story where they interview a guy that was one of those people, and his supervisor would walk in and just go into the room and go, "First heart container, Zelda, where is it?" people would go, ah.
Sir.
It was like totally just like, how do you beat the first level in balloon battle? And just like really
I
crazy.
mean, that's how you gotta do it though, right? I mean,
Yeah.
that's your job. That's
Yeah.
your livelihood.
Yeah, it was hilarious. I was like,
That sounds like
Matt,
an awesome environment.
Matt's gonna love this. Oh,
I'm jealous actually. I kind of want that job.
Speaking of things Matt would love, the Stanley Parable
Stanley
and the
Parable
Beginner's
and
Guide.
the Beginner's Guide. That's right, folks. Today we're looking at the #1 video game simulators, Beginner's Guide, and the Stanley Parable.
Hang on, can I do it? Oh!
That was good.
Yeah, it wasn't as good as yours, but I think it was.
Yeah, it never will be.
Okay.
Never forget your place. Okay. All right, folks. So these 2 games, to even have a general idea of what we're talking about, we're gonna have to give a brief synopsis of each of the games. Excuse me, before we get into the details. So
They're pretty dense.
They're pretty abstract. Big brain.
Huge brain.
So it was a struggle for me as usual.
Yeah.
So to start off, we'll look at the Beginner's Guide. So the Beginner's Guide, released October 2015, is an interactive storytelling game that has no unique characters you play as, but rather a lone narrator, Davey Wreden, the creator of the Stanley Parable. Wreden walks you through the games of his enigmatic friend and indie game developer, Coda. Over the course of about 2 hours, Davey guides you through Coda's games, some of which have been modified by Davey himself to be beatable in a timely manner. Throughout the journey, David continues to make deductions about what these games say about the developer Coda and his state of mind at the time of making them, seemingly portraying Coda as someone who was in a creative drought, depressed, and going through emotional struggles. To try and help his friend, Davey has decided to show the games to trusted friends to get positive feedback for Coda. And while the feedback was positive, this just leads Coda to draw in further seclusion and eventually stop making games. After not having contact with Coda for some time, Davey receives a file from Coda containing one final game. The game proves impossible to beat without extensive modification on Davey's end. Once reaching the end of the game, Coda reveals that Reedon has been modifying Coda's games far beyond what he led us to believe, and mistook the tone of Coda's games as signs of emotional struggle, and was missing the was missing the
Yeah.
the point. He was missing the point completely. Coda asks Davey to never contact him again. Davey reveals the purpose of the beginner's guide was to try and reconnect with Coda and hopefully apologize to him. In the final epilogue level, Davey elaborates on his own need for social validation, something he achieved through showing off Coda's games to the public.
Bam. That was the beginner's guide.
That was the beginner's guide.
It runs only about an hour and a half, which I think is a point too. It's really short.
Yeah,
it's
around 2 hours, depending on your pace.
It's almost like playing a movie, you know? It's like the equivalent of like kind of going in and watching one of those, and I think that's really cool.
I'd actually say it has even less gameplay than Stanley Parable in terms of like how you interact with the world.
It's very linear too.
It is. It is.
So Matt, just so everyone knows, Matt decided to make this a double episode. So this is, I'm like, dude, there's a lot here.
It sounded good.
So
it sounded good on paper.
So
we're in it now.
This is a long one. We're in it, okay? And I'm gonna give my synopsis of the Stanley Parable, and we're just gonna go in and start talking about both all day. Okay, yeah. So I won't be surprised if this runs to like an hour and a half, Matt, past your bedtime, which is gonna be fine. Because it was your choice to do this in the first place. So for the Stanley Parable synopsis, I'm actually going to read off the intro preamble that Kevin Brighting says at the very beginning of the game, because I think it actually sums up the premise of the game very well. And then I'm going to go into what else is done. So everybody, the Stanley Parable, released in 2011 for the PC. The game begins with the story of a man named Stanley, who works at a large company as employee number 427. His job is simple. Stanley sits at his desk and he pushes buttons instructed by his computer. And a lot of people would think that this job is very boring, but Stanley loved pushing the buttons at his computer. So every day of every week of every month, Stanley pushed buttons on his computer and he was happy. Then one day, Stanley suddenly realized that everybody in his office was gone. None of his coworkers were in their cubicles or at their desks. His boss hadn't called a meeting, and he was wondering when he was going to get instructions on what buttons to push at his computer because nothing had showed up on the screen. So Stanley decides to walk out of his office and explore what the hell is going on in his world. Okay, the Stanley Parable gameplay turns into you going down a series of different branching paths, breaking the narrative and going down the meta-fiction black hole, as I like to call it. Yeah, and that's really what it is, the meta-fiction black hole.
It's
because
like
the
narration hell.
Yeah, narration hell. It's insane. Basically, the game in Stanley Parable consists of you making certain choices within the game, and the narrator is talking about you in third person and then referring to you eventually in first person depending on the paths that you take, and creating this really interesting narrative experience where you're essentially breaking the game, but
Are you?
Yeah, it starts drawing that line, which is so crazy. And again, that's why it makes it so meta and
it's
so
like
cool.
Breaking the game by design is maybe one way to think of it.
Yeah. So, really cool game. Matt, what are we going on first?
Let's start with the mastermind. Let's talk about Big Dog Reedon.
Okay. I think Davey Reedon. So Davey Reedon is the creator of both of these games. He's the mastermind behind it all. And he's actually a character within the world of the Beginner's Guide. He is the narrator of the Beginner's Guide. And Davey Reedon is a super, super interesting guy. I did a lot of research on him. Actually,
he didn't even go to game school, like dev school.
No, nothing like that.
Film school, right?
He went to USC Film School,
Yeah, it's
which is
crazy.
actually not an easy thing to do in the first place.
No,
I applied
super
to
renowned
USC.
program.
Applied to USC Film School. They denied my application. They found some stuff on the criminal background that they couldn't really overlook. They denied me on that one, little 17-year-old Lucas. But it's no easy feat to just get into that school in the first place. And as Davey actually put it, it's an industry school. Their job is to make you get a job through that school. And while he was going through USC Film School, he was playing a lot of video games at the time. I think this was kind of the early indie game boom. I think it was like 08, 09 or something like that, where he was kind of exploring his creativity. He was obviously writing a lot of films, and he was actually more critical studies oriented in film school rather than production oriented, which is where a lot of people tend to go. So he was all about analyses, writing essays, writing crazy weird stories. And there's a story for anybody that's really interested in Davey. There is a great episode on the podcast Tone Control. You can just type it into your Spotify or your Apple right now, Apple Podcasts, and find it. And Davey talks about how his professor said, "Hey, dude, can you just write like a normal story for once? like a regular like beginning, middle, end."
I'd love to read some of his other stuff that he put together. Just
I would too. His professor was like, just write a normal story that people could just digest, because his stuff was way too crazy. It was like the Stanley Parable or the Beginner's Guide. So he's off the bat, he's a really interesting guy already. He was in film school, and he saw that there was so much more going on that was innovative in the video game world. I mean, this is like kind of that era. So this is like Braid. I think the same year the Stanley Parable came out, you had like Bastion, Terraria. Yeah. So you had some like really interesting video games, and like the cool thing about Last of Us, yes, The Last of Us
in 2013 with the remake, not the original 2011.
Oh, okay, fine. The thing that Davey actually says about video games that I really am aligned with, and Matt, you could agree or disagree here. I think that as gamers that I know are all open-minded enough to at least try and play something like the Stanley Parable or the Beginner's Guide, where the film equivalent of that stuff is like unwatchable for some people. I think that video games they're so innovative and they're so different, and everybody's so open-minded about trying new things in video games.
And they're more engaging than a weird movie sometimes.
Yeah, because you're active in it, you know? And
you're activated.
You're activated. Yeah. Every new innovative video game feels like it's really trying something new, is how I feel, especially during this era. With something like the Stanley Parable coming out, I mean, I had never played anything like it when I had played it.
Right.
And I didn't go like, oh, this is some pretentious art house shit. You know, I don't care for it. Or like, oh, there wasn't any judgments to make on it because it was so fresh. It was so new that I couldn't like give any sort of analytical take on it like I could a movie where I can go, oh, no, that guy, it's a throwaway, or it's self-important, or anything like that. It's so innovative.
So when did you hear of it first? Or which one did you hear first, actually? Stanley or Beginner's Guide?
Stanley Parable was the first introduction to Davey that I had gotten, first introduction. And really the Stanley Parable was one of the first introductions to a game like it, like a really artistically fulfilling game that
I think the Stanley Parable is the game that got me into indie games.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Before that, I think it was probably one of the first games I played on my PC. And before that, I was always just like, and I still am, obviously they're fun games sometimes, like, but I was just always, the Call of Duty, Halo guy, like Kingdom Hearts, like very, I guess, big developer, big AAA
games, yeah.
And I hadn't really played anything smaller like that. Then my cousin Johnny was a little bit older than me, and I was always like been really big into games and stuff, recommended it to me. I was like, all right, yeah, I'll check it out. Finally, my cousin's talking to me.
Dang, man, that's a good feeling.
Yeah, man.
Cool ass cousin.
I played it, and it was just like, oh my god. I must have been 2014. I would have been around 18 when I played it. And I wasn't in college yet. My brain couldn't comprehend what was going on.
You weren't? Oh, you weren't?
I was like entering college.
Oh my god, yeah.
Yeah, you're 1 year ahead of me.
Yeah, I'm 1 year ahead of you. Yeah. Oh, keep going. Go ahead.
But yeah, I just remember playing it, and it was just, there's nothing comparable to it really, as far as I think what it tries and how it kind of commentates on whether it's free will, whether it's altruism, whether it's narration.
Whether it's just fucking with you.
Whether it's just fucking with you. Maybe
Yeah.
none of it means anything. You know, like
Yeah.
it's what's beautiful about it is it can be taken in any direction you want it. And
Yeah.
you can really easily assign your own meaning to it. And I think that's one of the beautiful things about it.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. So I actually first played the Stanley Parable summer of 2014. So I think it would have been the same year as you, as your initial introduction. The game was released.
Did you get the achievement? Go outside.
No, I didn't because I didn't buy the game. Yeah, but
there's an achievement if you play the game. Excuse me. If you play the game and then you don't play it for 5 years, and then excuse me again. Wow. And then you reopen it, you get an achievement called going outside, which is not playing the game for 5 years.
Yeah, it's so. I mean, but that achievement is commentary on something in and of itself. And there's also another achievement I want to bring up too. That's really interesting. But my first introduction to the Stanley Parable was the summer of 2014, and for me, it was actually after my freshman year of college. So I was living in California, and I had graduated from high school in a small town in Oregon. So that summer, I decided to go back to Oregon, from the town that I was from, for a month and just kind of reset. You know, it was my first year of college, and I felt kind of lost at the time, honestly. So I just kind of stayed with a friend's apartment and chilled up in my town and just hung out, played Magic the Gathering, played some Smash Bros, you know. And then my friend kind of said, "Hey, you gotta play this game." And he just sat and watched me play it as I played it on his PC. He just wanted to get my opinion of it, you know. And for the next hour or so, I was just like blown away. Like, it was unbelievable how fast the game took me off my feet, you know. And it just unfolded so well for me. I think the first ending I got was like the really weird downstairs ending. And then I got the mind control facility ending.
I think my first ending was actually, I think I followed it to a T because I was scared to do anything else.
Oh, really? You did the mind control one?
I'm a sheep,
You're
baby.
a sheep, dude.
A
I
sheep.
knew it. Dude, okay, you are. Let's be honest. You can't even play a
I was like, what's going to happen if I don't lose it?
I know, dude. It's funny because, like, I think that I'm a half sheep, right? Because I think I took, like, the commands up to a certain point, and then I was like, no, fuck this narrator. I'm gonna go downstairs. And then that's the weirdest ending, in my opinion. That weird, like, where you're just part of somebody else's dream sort of ending, which is too deep for me to analyze.
I gotta be honest with you, though, man. I have a pretty sick sheep impression.
Go.
Bah.
I don't even know why I asked. Okay. Let me get back in.
Let's bounce to the beginner's guide, actually.
Wait, I gotta finish my
so
little thing
much.
here. So I played the Stanley Parable in a time in my life where it was after my freshman year of college. I had gotten out of a serious relationship, and I needed a reset, right? And I'm not saying the Stanley Parable was like this deep sense of meaning for me, but I do want to say I think the Stanley Parable was so refreshing and so insanely intellectually stimulating that it pulls you to a place that pulls you out of that. For me, I'm a huge proponent of, like, the media you consumes you, and I think that we're always surrounding ourselves with a lot of junk food and a lot of trash. You know, we're no different.
A lot of anime.
We watch anime. We play Valorant. We play Apex. We play League. And you know, at a certain point, those games really do wear on you. I think from an intellectual standpoint, where a lot of times they challenge you, but a lot of times they're not challenging you in necessarily a healthy way. Right. I think the Stanley Parable made me feel extremely refreshed from an intellectual standpoint. It felt like I was feeding my brain those vegetables and fruits. And I think that that's an important thing to say about this video game, at least from my perspective personally.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, yeah, it's the vegetables and the fruits and the vitamins, and then Valorant is like the junk food and the cyanide. You know?
Valorant is the cocaine for sure.
Pretty much.
It just brings you up.
Brings you up, gets you addicted, bro. I can quit anytime I want.
Brings you back down. Yeah, brings you all the way back down to Iron 2.
Iron 2. I got into Iron 3 last night. Yeah.
That's an achievement.
Back on topic. Beginners. Really quick though, beginner's guide. Yes. I only heard of it recently, actually. I think I always knew about it, but it wasn't top of mind until recently, when I know you and I were talking about doing an episode on Stanley Parable.
Yeah.
And I was like, wait a minute, I'm pretty sure this guy has another game. I just never played it. And I looked it up, and yeah, beginner's guide. And honestly, it's not even really a game you can get a first impression of or like a first take, and because it's for one, it's such a short game,
Yeah.
um, and you don't really, I guess, get the bulk of the story until the very like maybe last 10, 15 minutes.
Right.
Because Stanley, you're going to be really engaged from the beginning, where you realize, oh, I can break free from the narrator, I can do all these different tasks, get all these different endings, but um, beginner's guide is very linear in that regard, opposite of that, to where you're following a very set path and you're learning a very laid out story. And something I kind of realized, and what I think too, is beginner's guide is a game that encourages you to be a better human and a better friend, and it's a game that learned from Stanley Parable, whereas Stanley Parable is a game that encourages you to be more critical and to be a better gamer. And I really do think, and we can get into this more a little bit soon, but I really do think the beginner's guide is very much directly a product of how the Stanley Parable influenced David Reedon.
Absolutely, absolutely. And
Yeah.
I have a little anecdote about that one. The beginner's guide, the concept of it was concepted before the Stanley Parable was completed.
Conceptualized.
Concepted, yeah, yeah, like incepted, but concepted. Yeah. That's a thing.
You look good.
Thanks, man. It was concepted. Actually, before the Stanley Parable had actually been shipped,
Right.
and Davey Reedon just had the idea in his head, and he definitely took influence after the Stanley Parable came about, because Davey Reedon, the narrative has sort of become, and there's a blog post actually we're going to be talking about here. Davey Reedon did enter a space of depression and anxiety after the release of the Stanley Parable, and what's crazy is, Matt, I learned this happens very frequently with like a lot of very with people that are very hyper focused on a project,
Right.
and kind of pour their heart and soul into their very first project and kind of hit a home run. And I mean, Davey Reedon did that. He got so much.
I mean, he wasn't known at all before this, right? Like,
not really. I
yeah.
think he had made some mods. And I think he was kind of in a small circle of people that had been making stuff. Kind of like he had probably had a coda.
Yeah, but this like catapulted him,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
He was getting like emails that were basically saying like, "You're an absolute genius. Like, you are. How did you do it? Where'd you get this idea?" Like, hundreds of thousands of people had downloaded his game, and he had all this the validation that he actually says that he's had been seeking a lot. Seeking a lot of validation in his life to be called a genius, and he realized that there wasn't a lot of fulfillment in that scenario. He said, and this is a direct quote, again from that Tone Control podcast, he says, "It was like drinking from a fire hose, and it didn't make him any less thirsty." That's about the praise from the Stanley Parable, and it echoes so much into the beginner's guide.
Yeah, and it's almost like that kind of level of success gives you some weird mixture of almost imposter syndrome mixed with not narcissism. I don't think that's the right word I'm looking for, but just like that need for like more validation in a sense. And like,
right.
Are you sure it's good? Like, did this person like it? Did the person that emailed me here liked it? Like, did everyone like it?
Yeah.
And it's just it's like Instagram,
Oh,
it's
go
like
off on
when
Instagram.
I post a photo, it's like, oh, did I get enough likes? Am I getting my serotonin hit right now? Like,
oh yeah.
It turns into a drug. It's like success is a drug. Like that kind of success is, in my opinion, like
well,
a drug.
he says that.
In the brain.
He says that in the blog post about how he would just look for like validation on that stuff.
Right, and he was talking about how like every time there was a new Game Awards show, he's like, "Are we there? Are we there? Did we make it?
Am I on the Game of the Year's list here?"
Yeah.
He did say too. This is a quick one. He did say that any Game of the Year list that year that didn't have Papers, Please on it, he just wouldn't believe. Even
I
if
love
he was
that.
on it. Yeah, hey, I respect it, dude.
It's a good game.
This is a Lucas Pope podcast, so we loved Oberdin, we loved Papers, Please.
We did.
So yeah, I agree with Davey Reedon on that one, which is cool.
One day we'll touch on the. We'll do a special release of Papers, Please. Like
Papers, Please. Yeah. Papers, Please was our test episode podcast. Yeah. So technically episode 0 was Papers, Please. One day we may release that that one.
And speaking of that blog post though, too, there was an amazing quote from a comic book, or a comic, like a little strip he wrote to accompany the blog post, where he's going over how it kind of like caused him to fall into depression. And I think this quote really makes it very clear how much influence the aftermath of Stanley Parable had on the beginner's guide. So the quote goes, "Since Stanley Parable launched, I've been feeling kind of unhinged, floating between two emotional states. On one hand, a sense of ownership over this thing I've worked on for 4 years. On the other hand, the loss of having turned that ownership over to hundreds of thousands of people." And I think anyone, end quote, I think anyone that does anything that is a creative, that puts out a product that is creative in some way or another, once you do finally release it to all those people, it's going to be, on one hand, it's going to be like, oh my God, this is amazing. On the other hand, it's going to be, oh my God, why are they looking at it this way? It's going to be two very contradicting feelings, because as the artist, he probably, even with the game that's as flexible as Stanley Parable, you're going to have a certain image and a certain takeaway you want people to have inherently, I think.
Right.
Even if it's on a subconscious level. And then once you see someone that maybe has a take on it that you don't like at all, it's going to be like, what? Like, Nani? Like,
yeah. That's true.
And it's interesting, because especially with a game that is as heavily analyzed as Stanley Parable, it really does kind of take away, it's like, is it really your game anymore?
Right.
And I think that's an interesting idea that probably not a lot of game developers, at least not that we hear of a lot, because when you think of a big game, like Last of Us 2, there's gonna be like 1 million people working on that game. It's not like one person's ownership.
Right. Or Titanfall 2. Right.
Or Titanfall 2. Whereas this was worked on by just Davey, and then William Pugh as well. We can't forget him.
Right. Yeah.
Helped with the remaster that was released in 2013. But
now, I do want to, on that though, which is really interesting, is like when it comes to something like a AAA title, like we just did Titanfall 2, that was our previous episode, and that's just a big, fun AAA, awesome game, right?
It's a movie.
And it's a movie. It's like playing through an action movie, right? Whereas the Stanley Parable and the Beginner's Guide, they actually require there to be like an authorial voice. Authoritarian? Whatever the word is.
Authoritarian?
No, not authoritarian. they require an author's voice to be in there. Like, you have to know that one singular individual had the concept and had the direction here and had the vision. Otherwise, it doesn't work. I mean, the Beginner's Guide, literally, yes, right? The Stanley Parable, though, you play it and you feel like, oh, this was like a guy. This is a guy's idea. This is written by one person, and it's small enough in scale to feel like it was kind of just a small, like maybe one guy and a small team of people building out stuff. It doesn't like feel big, so the messages can be taken more seriously. I think that's really important to consider. The bigger the scale goes on the video game, the further you get away from authorial intent, right?
Right, yeah.
And with Stanley Parable, it's so close, and it makes it special for that reason.
Yeah, it's crazy, and it's, again, I just love the Beginner's Guide too, because it's so clearly, like I mentioned, it's just so clearly a contradiction to Stanley Parable. Like, it's, the way I look at it is, Beginner's Guide is almost directly asking you to not overanalyze and like just stop dissecting the Stanley Parable, like leave it alone and just move on type of thing, which I thought was super fun. Fun pop quiz.
Oh no. All
right, pop quiz. What TV show has the Stanley Parable made an appearance in?
I don't watch a lot of TV. Hang on. Is Supernatural still on the air? Do they still play that one?
It is not Supernatural.
Okay. How about Leverage? They still play that one?
I'll give you one more hint. It's on Netflix. I think it's
that doesn't help. The Office, bro.
That's not bad.
Oh, okay. Hang on. I'm close. Am I
guess.
close? Okay.
One word. Politics.
House of Cards.
Oh! Yeah, Daddy.
Wait. House of Cards is 3 words.
What?
Oh, you said one word. Oh, shit.
I meant one guess. If I
okay.
I apologize.
Wait.
Yeah, House of Cards.
Are you serious?
Yeah, it's I don't know, I stopped watching after like season 2, so I looked up the scene, but I didn't have the full context. But it's Frank Underwood talking to like some guy, and the guy's having him play through the Stanley Parable, and he's just like, I don't get it. And the guy's like, if you don't follow instructions, chaos ensues.
Really?
And
Dude.
Frank's like, I don't got time for this.
It's funny because he's a gamer on the show.
He is.
Kevin
He plays
Spacey's
like
character.
Call of Duty to unwind and stuff. Yeah.
I mean, that was just product placement for PlayStation, though.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, that's just clear as day in that
Yeah.
one, and just want to say that. But dude, that's actually cool. It made a cameo. I'm happy about that. I wonder how Davey feels about that.
I mean, I'm sure they had to get his permission, obviously. Yeah.
I don't know because in that blog post, Davey puts on the bottom of the blog post. Did you see that?
I might have missed that part. What he said.
So on the bottom of the blog post that we're referring to, which is where Davey talks about the success of the Stanley Parable and how it put him into a really tough mental spot. At the very bottom, it says, I hereby grant permission for all people to use my video game, use the Stanley Parable to create any sort of content that you want. I'm not going to flag
really?
you for anything. Monetize to your heart's desire. Do whatever
That's
you
really
want.
cool.
Yeah, so I mean, it's possible that they didn't have to ask permission because he kind of gave it out publicly to everybody. I don't know what kind of legal standing that particular blog post has, but it shows the attitude of Davey, right? Where he's just like, hey,
Very much so. Yeah.
I put it out into the world. It belongs to you now. It doesn't belong to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely, man.
So I wanna jump on over to game design. Is that cool with you, Matt?
Yeah, Daddy.
Okay. So Stanley Parable's game design, and then we'll jump on over to the beginner's guide. I mean, overall, what do you think of the actual interactive ideas behind the Stanley Parable?
Phenomenal. Like, I have nothing bad to say about how the Stanley Parable approached anything. It's just such a there's like this dissonance, right? Because in that game, storytelling is not like a choice. It's not a narrative thing, but it's a gameplay mechanic.
Yeah.
And it's just the whole game design. It's like, is there any real direction? Is there not direction? It's I can't even form words about it because it's just so abstract.
I think like the game design of Stanley Parable is so tied into everything about it. I mean, the game design is literally just walk and make choices, right? Walk. Yeah. I mean, just I want to make sure we touch on this because it's like the crux of the whole problem, like that the Stanley Parable presents, which is you're walking around your office at the very beginning of the game, and you walk down a hallway, and you just kind of turn left, turn right, walk around, and you approach a room that has a door on the left and a door on the right, okay? And the narrator says, when Stanley came to a pair of doors, he went through the door on the left. So the narrator is already talking about what you did in the past tense. Now you as a player, you have control over your character, so you can go left or you can go right? So if you go left, the story continues and the narrator keeps talking and you do the next thing and he keeps talking and so on and so on. But if you go through the door on the right, you actually broke the narrator's narration. So that moment when you go up to the door and Stanley entered the door on the left, you're presented with an inherent problem, right? And it's the problem of like narration versus like control and free will and gameplay. And I think like that's where the game design kicks in. That is the game, right?
Yeah.
Everything.
It's jarring at first.
I know where it hits you and you're like,
yeah, it's like,
wait,
I can just what? Like,
yeah, I could just walk through the door on the right. Yeah, you're not.
And I'm gonna take this door, and then I'm gonna go in a broom closet for 20 minutes.
Yeah, exactly. And the game is just a series of branching. It has multiple endings. Obviously, I think it has. I mean, Matt, I think it had 16 endings. Of various.
It's really a game that lets you get to express yourself. You
Yeah.
get to create your own story. You get to have your own fun. Obviously, there's some gameplay that is unavoidable with the way the narrator chimes in and stuff, but it really is a game where you get to do what you want and you get to decide what Stanley's all about at the end of the day, which is crazy.
Right. And I think that the gameplay will lead you to a different ending each time, depending on the choices that you make. There are not necessarily there's no wrong choices in the game. There's just different endings.
Yeah.
And each individual ending, I think, sort of covers a different philosophical idea. I'm going to go into some of my favorite endings near the end, but different ideas. There's ideas of like free will, like Matt said. There's ideas of altruism, and there's all these kind of interesting little things that get revealed during each ending, and it's just so cool. The game actually breaks the fourth wall to the point where it's like borderline just like really genius. I know we said
And
that word.
insanity, yeah.
Yeah, like
It's kind of funny too. I listened to an interview with Reedon, and the interviewer was like, "So how did you approach the level design for each ending?" And Reedon's just like, "It's a game. Who cares?" Like,
yeah.
like
God,
the
he's
most
the
Davey
goat.
Reedon answer you could give is like, yeah, forget it. Like,
He's so he's I got a lot of respect for that guy. He's super cool. Like okay, for instance, hang on, I do want to bring this up. There's an achievement in the Stanley Parable, and you go on Steam and you look at the achievements, and it says like, click on this particular door 5 times. Did you do that one?
I don't think I did. No.
So there's an achievement. Let's just call it. It might be door 420. It's like, click on door 420 5 times. That's the name of the. That's the achievement description. So I was like, oh, sick, like an achievement. So I walk over the door. I click on it 5 times, and the narrator goes, "Did you really think an achievement would be that easy to get?" It's like, oh my god, they got me. Like
they're
it was
insane, man.
like it's operating on a level that's like even beyond the realm of the game, where like they're actually writing in meta fiction in the actual achievements, making it like ultra meta. Like
it's like fifth wall breaking.
yeah,
It's like,
they broke the fifth wall.
it's like the
It's
fourth wall is
insane.
it talking to you, and then the fifth wall is it like going into your computer and making like achievements like that. It's like Doki Doki Literature Club or something. It's insane.
Okay, I haven't played that
I
one
wonder
yet.
if Doki Doki was at all inspired by Stanley Parable. That'd be interesting. If
When we do our Doki
look
Doki
at.
episode, I think that'd be a
Yeah.
good thing to talk about. So, and that's, well, oh, we got to move on to the beginner's guide gameplay. I
So-
could talk for hours on this one.
Yeah, and in the beginner's guide too, before we get like strictly, there's really actually not that much gameplay to discuss. It's basically just you walking through Coda's games, and there's like maybe one or two levels where you have a gun to shoot, even though you don't really have any targets, and there's maybe another level where you have to solve, or all the levels have some sort of like extremely rudimentary basic puzzle to solve, but there's not really any engagement or gameplay like there is in the Stanley Parable. But where it lacks in, I guess, the gameplay, it tells this phenomenal story, and the game design really is the storytelling really is the game design here in a similar but different way to how it is in Beginner's Guide. Like, for example, one thing that I just found so interesting and so compelling about the Beginner's Guide and kind of what it's trying to say, and at least what I took from it personally. Sorry if this is wrong, Davey.
Go ahead. Hey, man.
I really think it touches on the idea, in my opinion, of like altruism not really being a thing and not really being possible. Because the whole thing is, Davy Reedon's character. We'll call this game Davy versus like Davy Prime to reference the beginner's guide.
There's
Davy.
two Davies. You want to contextualize that?
So game Davy clearly uses. He takes Coda's games. He's like, all right, I'm going to show these to all these people. This is a nice thing to do. This is the right thing to do. But at the end of the game, he really just admits he's doing it for himself, and he's doing it for the reasons of feeling good, even though on paper, at the surface level, it looks like a really altruistic kind of selfless thing to do, to take the time to go and show these games to people. But really, it's just doing it for himself. And they could do a whole thing on how the debate of like whether things can be altruistic in nature or not, because at the end of the day, like, we do things to an extent because we are motivated by feeling good. Hey, I donated $100,000 to charity. That's so nice. Like, but damn, that makes me look good on Instagram. It makes me feel good.
That makes me feel good. Yeah, even if you're doing it for the feeling of feeling good, you're still technically doing it for a selfic reason.
Yeah, which is weird. But then there's also the argument where, like, if you're doing it empathetically, like, I'm getting off topic. But
no, it goes no. I mean, that feeds into one of the themes, I think, in the beginner's guide for sure, because the character in the game, Davy, is being altruistic. Right?
Yeah, he's attempting to be, sympathize with Coda and trying to help him. It's really, is this altruism or is this just selfless satisfaction? There's fulfilling selfish desires, rather. Excuse me. So I just think that's so interesting in the way the game kind of pries at that. And there's one level in particular, one of the few levels in Beginner's Guide where you really are interacting with the world around you. And in my opinion, it's the one level that completely contradicts what the Stanley Parable is going for.
Okay, let me hear it.
So there's a level where you're literally just in a house, like in this like mountain landscape. You're in a house and you're just helping the owner of the house clean. There's nothing else really, nothing intended. Game Davy breaks the game to where you can eventually leave and quote unquote beat the level. But for all intents and purposes, Coda designed that game for you to not be able to leave that house and for you to just continue doing menial tasks and cleaning this house. Game Davy comments how he thinks this level is one of the only times Coda was truly happy. Coda was happy creating a game where you're doing menial tasks. Complete opposite of a game like Stanley Parable, where you're constantly breaking the norm. You're not just pushing buttons. It's just a total, in my opinion, it's a complete contradiction, and it totally, there's so many meanings you can take from Stanley Parable, but it totally invalidates the one of like not being a sheep, in my opinion, and totally invalidate might be harsh, contradicts that idea, because there is something to be said for doing a simple task and completing it and seeing the results. Cleaning a house, knowing that you cleaned it really well yourself and that you didn't have to hire any outside party or something to help it. No, man, I'm serious. Like that's like, okay, cool, I did something today. It's that simple self-satisfaction,
Right.
Maybe, or like going out and doing like manual like labor. The movie Office Space comments really well on this too, actually.
Is that your companion piece pick?
Maybe. But I just thought that was so interesting how it totally contradicts the idea of not being a sheep to where Coda was at his happiest being
when
a sheep.
he was
Creating a game where you are a sheep. And I'd argue Coda is actually the hero of that story.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I think so too.
That blew my mind, and it was, it's crazy. And then really the beginner's guide itself is a game about kind of touching on some of the dangers of overanalyzing things. And look at me go!
Yeah, look at you go, dude. You're overanalyzing everything.
I'm overanalyzing the shit out of it. It's like, why'd the author make the curtains blue? Because he wanted to.
Yeah. No, I think that's really interesting too, because yeah, exactly. I mean, the beginner's guide has so much to say. I think it does the most with how much time it has on screen to say. It's on screen for an hour and a half or 2 hours max, depending on how long you play it for. And I think the beginner's guide just has so many layers in there, because it has like those themes of altruism, where like Game Davy doing what he's doing in the beginner's guide is doing so to make himself feel better, right? The character that Davy Reed and Davy Prime is playing is just trying to make him release himself from this guilt he has about Coda. Meanwhile, Coda is just this kind of genius, really creative game designer that's creating all these games that are giving Davy like imposter syndrome in a way.
Yeah.
So there's like themes of that. Coda is like a creative artist type himself, or whatever but Coda is also like not, because Coda just likes making games about prison. And they even talk about that. It's like Coda's not necessarily somebody who's trying to be like super deep. Coda's just trying to
doing it at once.
Experiment, And I think like Game Davy trying to find all these meanings to Coda's games is kind of part of what you said, is like overanalyzing for the sake of overanalyzing.
Yeah, literally like one of the message at the end of the game where Coda reveals like he knows what he's been doing, that, like showing his games to people without his permission. He's like, I know you're showing my games, like you're totally missing the point. I think one of the quotes is something like, you thinking these mean I'm depressed says lot
more about you than it does about me. Yes,
yeah,
dude.
like,
okay.
Oh my god.
Okay, hang on. I don't know if you caught my stream, but for those of you that caught it on Twitch when I was playing,
I watched a little bit, but so I didn't want to get spoiled.
I was playing through the beginner's guide on Twitch, and I think I got like maxed out at like 3 viewers on that one, so I could definitely use some more followers.
That's more than 2.
Yeah, it is. It's more than one.
Twitch.tv, good idea, Lucas.
That's right. I was streaming this one, and when I saw that quote, I literally stopped and I like talked to the chat. I was like, "Yo, yeah." I was like,
"Yeah."
I know a lot of people that like project their own negativity or like meaning into some artworks, specifically like movies and TV shows, and it definitely says more about them than it does about the work or the author behind the work. And I paused on the stream and I was just like, everybody take this advice right now. This is real shit right here. And I love that was thrown in there, even though at the end, I mean, ultimately, there is no Coda. There is no Game Davy, right? And it's all just part of the game world. It's part of a story that we're meant to believe for a little bit. And it still has a lot to say about those kinds of things, and I think we should still try and derive meaning from what Game Davy's trying to get across, despite it not being real. I think I was reading some reviews, like a lot of people, as soon as they find out Coda's not real or it was all made up, they're just like, it's bullshit. Like, this game is like, I want a refund.
I was watching some like video essays on Beginner's Guide 2, and there are some camps that still firmly believe Coda's a real person.
Really? That's
Yeah.
interesting. There's people that still want their. There's people that try to get refunded about from the game. Like
Really?
people that go like, oh, he,
Oh,
Davy
I remember you
Reedon.
reading about that. He like stole these games. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. It
I
was
think
like,
you're talking about.
oh, Davy Reedon stole somebody else's games and passed them off as his own game and packaged them up. He steals from people and like this isn't cool. I want my money back. You know, this isn't the game I wanted or whatever.
Dude,
And
honestly, if Coda was actually real, they could totally make a movie about this. It'd be
oh
like
yeah.
The Social Network or something.
Oh, dude, that'd be intense. It's kind of funny too. Davey talked about like on the podcast by Tone Control. He talked about he would get emails from people. You get two kinds of emails from people. Well, he got a lot of emails about the beginner's guide,
Yeah.
but he would get one
He
email.
literally gives his email at the beginning of the game.
Yeah, exactly. So people could email him, and some emails would go like, "Oh my god, it was genius. I thought that was awesome. Great job. You know, is Coda real though?" And then he just wouldn't answer it, and he just like would ignore it, like, oh whatever, like, you know, I'm not gonna answer that just for the sake of not answering it. But then he would get some emails of people that believed everything face value, and they were like, oh my god, you are an asshole, you are a total jerk, you know. And like it's kind of funny because there is no reading if you believe everything at face value. There's no reading other than this guy's an asshole. This guy is a jerk. He's just trying to like he projected all of his negativity and depression onto Coda during that time, and then he tried to release his guilt by releasing the beginner's guide. What a total asshole, right? And like Davey says in the Tone Control podcast, he says, okay, I'm actually not an asshole. I have literal proof that I'm not, because this is not real. It's like there was the one thing he's like, I am not, I swear. That's so interesting. So I do want to move on. Are you good on game design for these two, or you want to?
I'm good, yeah, man.
So art design.
Art.
Yeah.
Honestly,
what do you think of the art style?
The simplicity of it serves it well.
I agree.
Especially with Beginner's Guide, because it's a game that is made by the story is that it is made by a very indie game developer. You know, does its own thing. And at the beginning of the game, Reed even says it's all made in the source engine. You know, it doesn't go beyond that, so it serves it perfectly. I mean, it's not like insane or anything. It serves the story very well and does its purpose, in my opinion. And same with Stanley Parable. I don't really have, I guess, too many thoughts.
Yeah, I completely agree with both. I think, one thing on the Stanley Parable is I think it's meant to be a very dry, depressing office space. I think the source engine actually plays like a big role.
It does serve that very well with what it enables you to create. Yeah.
It's very boxy, you know.
Right.
So it's very boxy, long corridors and things like that. And I think the source engine obviously does that very well. Having played a lot of Counter-Strike, you know, kind of understand that one. And I think, I mean, the beginner's guide, it quite literally says it's built on the source engine. Right. So we wouldn't be able to even have that line if it wasn't true, right? But the whole thing about it is, I think that these games wouldn't work if it wasn't the source engine, just because it needs to feel like an indie game in order to work. If this was some overproduced, Blizzard-looking playable Pixar,
right.
Everything's playable Pixar these days, right? And I think the messaging would have gotten a little lost because it would have felt too overproduced to feel.
It does have to be, it does have to be simple to work. I think there's no way around that.
Yeah, it reminded me of,
especially for a beginner's guide, yeah.
Yes, actually more especially for that than the Stanley Parable. It kind of reminds me of like the Blair Witch Project, where you don't have a budget for like expensive gear, and you don't have a team with expertise, so you can't even like you can't do like a big overproduced thing. So you try to form a narrative that'll work for that gear, right? So it's like, oh, like let's make the art, the engine, the art style, an actual like point in the story and the narrative about this game. So I mean, it's crazy because you're making a very plain looking source engine design feel so alive, despite it just inherently looking.
Because the narration's so good and the story's so enticing and it really envelops you. And keep in mind, again, this was released in 2015, you know, so Reedon absolutely, especially with his connections and resources at that point, he absolutely could have made a more produced game if he wanted to. There was definitely no doubt about that, but he chose to make the beautiful story with the basic art style, and it worked perfectly, and it really meshed well together.
Right.
God, Davey Reed and Lucas. I want to see Davey Reed and Lucas Pope team up because, like, obviously
Can they do
Reed,
that?
like, to less of an extent, like with the art design and sound design, but they're both just so interesting and artistic. And obviously
Yeah.
Reed likes Papers, Please.
Oh yes, he
Yeah.
does. Yeah, I wonder.
So
I would just pay money for like an interview of those two just talking to each other.
just they
love
should
it.
start a podcast.
They should. They
We
should
should have them on this.
Now,
Tweet at Davey and Lucas Pope to
somebody
come hang out.
Somebody who knows Davey Reedon or Lucas Pope, please have them reach out to us. Cool.
I'm
All right,
almost
cool. It
afraid
happened.
of him. I'd almost be afraid of Reed listening to this episode and being like, "Nah, you guys got it wrong."
No. Come on. He's
He's a homie, I'm sure.
Yeah, he's the homie. Yeah. Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head with the art design, and it's all very true. And about sound design, Matt, how are we feeling about that?
The Stanley Parable would not work without the phenomenal voice actor
Kevin
that
Brighton.
has
Kevin Brighton. Yeah.
Oh my God, I can't think of a more perfect person for that. It's like they took a guy out of the British Office and then placed him in there.
He's amazing. Yeah,
He's amazing.
he's seriously the most perfect narrator. I can't imagine that game without it. And it's crazy too because like to actually concept the whole game before you have a narrator hired and hear his voice would have been so
Oh, did they
difficult.
really?
Yeah, I mean he wrote.
I
he
had
wrote
no
the whole
idea.
thing. He wrote the whole thing out. He actually had it all in a notebook before he started building more and building a team and everything like that. And like Kevin, I'm assuming Kevin Brighton came in at some point around during the production and stuff.
Right. Yeah.
I could be wrong. Somebody's gonna fact check me, and that's fine. But Kevin Brighting is just such a solid narrator, and the game wouldn't work without him. And then of course, like Davey Reedon's voice in the beginner's guide, it wouldn't work without that either. It's the whole game. As far as the sound, I mean that's the sound. That's the breadth of the sound design. Unless you have anything else, Matt.
No, I mean, there's the sound doesn't really serve much purpose in beginner's guide, barring using it at certain points to kind of make a
point.
very atmospheric.
Yeah.
Nothing. It ain't no Lucas Pope.
Yeah. It's not on that Lucas Pope level of sound
Yeah.
design, but I think Davey's really into narration for sure. So I'm looking forward to seeing him become like the narrator or narration-driven game maker.
I'm just thinking
while
of a
Lucas
game
Pope-
right. I'm just thinking of a game right now where it's like the narration and the story design of Davey Reedon with the art and music design, sound design
of Lucas Pope.
my
Oh,
God.
dude, that would be insane.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like Obra Dinn, but there's a narrator. Yeah, maybe Davey will become like sort of like a Terrence Malick voiceover video game auteur. Terrence Malick,
I'm with it.
Matt, he's a filmmaker. I think I told you about him. He uses a lot of voiceover in his films. He's very well known for it.
Sounds
And
healthy.
Davey, I know you know who that is because you went to USC Film School, so please become that guy. Love that. Yeah, sound design, narration, solid. A few music choices in the beginner's guide were great. Now, Matt, who do you have for the NPC award?
I mean, for the Stanley Parable, it's really just either the narrator or the female narrator, and I'll go with the female narrator.
Can we argue that those are not NPCs?
Is there any NPC?
Okay, an NPC is a non-player. Oh, you know what? He is.
Yeah. They're a character in the story, and you can't play as them.
Okay. Non-playable character, NPC. Okay, that's a good NPC
I would
award.
say the female narrator, just because I really like her ending too, where it's like,
The museum.
yeah, it just keeps peeling back layers and layers of the game, and then it's like, I'm the real narrator. I'm the one that's like really overseeing everything, and
Yeah.
it's almost. I read an interesting comparison where it's like, not believing in like the male narrator is, like a metaphor for atheism.
Really?
And believing in the narrator, like on that specific ending, is like akin to believing in God and having faith. And then the female narrator was just like a blast of like realism or something, like, no, only you can save yourself type of thing.
Whoa.
And I thought that was really interesting too.
I like that.
Museum ending as well was just pretty sick.
I like that.
And then for the beginner's guide, it was the machine.
Oh, okay.
That was
the machine that you shoot.
Coda's creative brain thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. I like that. My NPC pick, for the Stanley Parable, I guess it has to be the narrator. But for the beginner's guide, I got the NPC in the house when you're doing the chores. I felt good doing those chores in that house. I did.
I liked it too, honestly. It was very refreshing.
It was very like warm and inviting and very soft and just nice. You know, it's a nice house.
I'm a sheep.
Yeah, me too. I like doing the chores. God, no. I really like that part, and it was just kind of, I for lack of a better word, it was very sweet. And I think it was like, it felt very like at home, very cozy. And I'm a big fan of cozy environments and stuff like that. And that NPC definitely played a big role in making it feel that way. So
felt safe.
Yeah, it felt safe. So that NPC gets the NPC award from me in this episode.
Now, Lucas, you're a smart guy. You're creative.
I'm not.
You're a big movie guy. Artistic is a word I would use to describe you.
No.
For your Tinder bio, if I had to write it. So, what is your companion piece pick for this? And for any new listeners, the companion piece is where we look at any other medium that we think would go well with these games. That
a non-video
game. So, a book, film, short series, anything really.
Anime.
Art, anime.
Yeah. Anything that you think kind of relays a similar message as what we're talking about here. And my companion piece pick for this is actually a film called The Holy Mountain by Alejandro Jodorowsky. It's a 1973 Mexican surreal fantasy film. It's this trippy underground phenomenon. The Beatles at the time really liked it, if that means anything to anybody out there. And it's kind of a film school film. It's pretty obscure stuff. I watched it when I was in high school because my older brother introduced me to it. And it really did change a lot of my perspective on things. It's very visually interesting. It's very visceral, just super crazy and weird. Davey, I know you've seen that film. You went to USC Film School, so you definitely saw it. It's also saying anything more of how it relates to these might spoil the people that would watch that film. So I don't want to say anything else about my companion piece. But if you're into these games, if you're open-minded, check out The Holy Mountain. I think you can find it on iTunes for a few bucks. Also streaming on Prime for a few bucks renting. So, Matt, what about you?
For me, man, I gotta go with Mr. Nobody.
Okay.
Mr. Nobody.
What's Mr. Nobody?
I want to say it was released 2011. It is a movie starring Jared Leto. And minor spoilers ahead. I don't really know how to give a fair description of it without not spoiling it.
Skip ahead 2 minutes, people, if you want to avoid this one.
Basically, it's a movie that follows Nemo. I think the guy's main name is Nemo. And Nemo is the last living human in a world of humans that is all have figured out immortality because of like stem cells, right?
Yeah, sounds right. Checks out.
And they're interviewing now known as Mr. Nobody. They're interviewing Nemo before he dies. And Nemo is giving his life story to this interviewer, but he gives 3 extremely different versions of his life that all start and branch off at the same point of when he's forced to pick either going with his mother or his father as a divorce. And it takes you through all these different storylines, and then at the end of it all, Nemo tells you, or Mr. Nobody reveals, actually, I'm not real as an old guy, and you, the interviewer, aren't real. You're all inside my head right now. And then he takes you all the way back to the beginning, where he's forced to make that choice of going with his mom or his father, and that's the movie.
Whoa. Unreliable narrator.
Unreliable narrator. It basically takes you through the whole thing, gives you like all these 3 different versions of what could happen, and it's like you're kind of left to decide what's real, what isn't real, and it's like, oh, it's all just a dream, bro.
Yeah. Dang, I like that. That's a good companion piece pick. I'll have to check out Mr. Nobody.
It's a really good movie, yeah. Even with those like minor spoilers, because each individual storyline is very, very good.
Yeah.
And definitely worth watching.
Awesome, man. Awesome. So, last one, I want to end on... I mean, we're giving these games a lot of praise. I want to end on the super high note of favorite moment.
Favorite moment.
So, what's your favorite moment?
Oh. Stanley Parable. For Stanley Parable, it's the ending where you go into like Minecraft and Portal.
That one was sick.
Because I was just like, what?
You want to contextualize that ending?
um, I don't exactly remember the lead up to be honest, but basically the narrator starts taking. Or do you want to?
Yeah. So it's basically like you go to you go to an area of the map that's not finished yet, and the narrator says like, "Oh, are you happy now? You're
Oh,
exploring
that's
an
right.
area
Yeah,
of the game that's not even done yet." He's like, "Does this make you happy? Like, are you excited about seeing like a part of the game that doesn't even exist? You go to like this big room that's just empty,
yeah.
basically."
Yeah. Just
And
like tiles, basically.
yeah, and like the game's that area of the game isn't finished yet, and the narrator talks about that, and yeah, sorry, and then he goes like, "Oh, would another game make you feel better?" And then all of a sudden you're
So he
teleported into
starts
yeah,
he starts jumping you through Minecraft, and then you go into a portal where you're actually able to go and like solve a real portal puzzle, which is
yeah.
just crazy. And I was just blown away by I'm like, how did he get like the okay for that?
I
But
know.
yeah, he contacted Notch, the creator of Minecraft, and then he was like, yeah, dog. And the same thing. And after quote some extensive paperwork, he was able to get Valve to let him do uh,
Portal.
Portal as well. And I want to say too, he's lucky he got to Minecraft when it was still owned by Notch, because now it's owned by Microsoft, and there's no way he'd be able to get through all that red tape, corporate red tape, to get to have that game in there.
That's actually a good point to make. Yeah, that was
Yeah,
9 years ago. So that was 9 years ago. Minecraft was in a very different place than it is now.
very early. Yeah,
It's now the most like most highest selling
it's like the
game of
biggest
all.
game.
It's the
Yeah,
highest selling game of all time now.
it's insane.
I think back then, yeah, it was just kind of like an indie phenomenon that was on like computers. It must have been. I don't even know if it was on consoles at that point.
Yeah, I
But
want to say it came on the consoles around like 2012 or 2013, because I remember playing with friends in high school, but different
yeah,
story. Yeah,
yeah, different pod
different
maybe.
pod.
But yeah, no, that's a cool ending. I like that ending a lot. That's your favorite moment? Can I go mine?
For Stanley. Oh, then for Beginner's
Okay.
Guide, just the ending, because it's just I love how it really shows how don't overanalyze things sometimes, and that line where it's like you thinking I'm depressed is more about you than me just blew my mind. I was like, oh shit.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
love
so
that. Yeah,
that's
I
what I
love
got.
that line. I got so my favorite moment of the Stanley Parable is probably the apartment ending. Oh my god, this apartment ending actually like made my heart drop. It's so intense. So basically, the ending is you follow
It's
like a
very
certain
intense.
yeah you follow this certain branching path where you end up teleporting to your apartment where like your girlfriend slash wife is. Okay, so you go to this apartment and like you just hear you get teleported outside of an apartment door, right? And then you hear a girl on the other side of the door, a female voice, and she says like, "Oh, honey, hang on, let me just let you in real quick." And the door opens, and it's just a mannequin. It's just a lifeless female mannequin.
It's super creepy.
And it's like really creepy. There's like a weird sound that happens, and then you enter the apartment, and the narrator just does this really long monologue about what you're in the apartment, basically saying like, you know, Stanley wanted to do this. He it it's hard to describe. Basically, the narrator just talks about the life that Stanley is having. Stanley would go and hang out with the boys. Stanley would go do this and go to work and talk to his wife. But then, like, these buttons start coming up on the screen, these instructions that say, like, push V to live life. And you push V.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
then, like, another instruction comes up while the narrator's talking, and it says, like, push shift to have a beer with the boys. So I push shift. And then it says like it just starts getting even more like kind of crazy, and the narrator says, "Look it, you don't have any free will at all. You'll just do whatever the screen tells you to do." And then it says like push B to, you know, live life or go to bed
Yeah.
or whatever, and you push B, and like as you're pushing these buttons, you realize that like you can't stop, like because pushing the button is the only way to progress the story.
I specifically
And,
remember a moment too where I wanted to stop. I'm like, I got it. It's right there. I got it.
yeah,
I got to push
exactly.
it.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just the nature. I think that's a lot of commentary on like free will and the nature of video games, which I think is super cool for these. I mean, that's what a lot of these games are about,
Yeah.
or what these two games are about. And basically saying like, we can't stop ourselves from pushing these buttons. That's our job. That's what we do. We're Stanley,
Yeah.
you know, and we play as gamers, me and Matt, right? And you listening right here. We are gamers. We play video games. We push buttons on a screen and we
And
love
go where
it.
even with something like,
That's Stanley Parable.
and even with games that have as strong as narratives as say as something like a BioShock or a BioShock Infinite have like these crazy mind-boggling stories. they're still very linear, and it's still very much like go here, defeat this bad guy,
Yeah.
go here, defeat this bad guy, watch this cutscene. And while I'm not criticizing those games, I love both of those games. It's just it's Stanley Parable has a very clear opinion on, in my opinion, on that kind of stuff, and a very
Yeah,
clear
it
view.
does. Yeah, but I don't think I think that Coda likes Bioshock. Or no, sorry, Coda. Davey likes Bioshock, right? I mean,
Yeah,
he likes these popular video games that are out. He's just commenting on the absurdity of it all.
he's asking you to be a better gamer, to be a more critical thinker.
I think so, and I think so, and I think he's inviting you to think about what games are at their
Right.
core, right?
Yeah.
And this leads me into actually one of my favorite endings too, and this is another one. I actually didn't get this ending. I saw this one on a playthrough, but I think it was super interesting. It's the not real Stanley ending, or like the ceiling ending, and it's this ending where you go through a branching path and you end up kind of in the ceiling space above the two doors. Okay, and you see your own body looking at the two doors. Okay, so it's almost picture like a ghost floating above your body, like a near-death experience. Okay, and the narrator says like, "Okay, Stanley, pick one of the doors. You know, I said that you go through the one on the left," and like nothing happens because you're not Stanley
not
anymore.
controlling.
You're the
Yeah.
ghost of Stanley above, and like you can move and stuff above the ceiling, and like the narrator like ends up realizing that he's trapped, and he's like, "Stanley, like you have to move. I can't I can't say anything else unless you move." And he's like, he starts freaking out, and like there's a lot of fear in his voice, and he's like, "Stanley, like please." And like the credits start rolling and the game is like about to restart, you know?
Yeah.
And it's like, I don't know, I think that's commentary on like how games need a player and games need a creator. And they can't exist without the other. Like a game has to have someone playing it, otherwise is it a game? You know, it's just that narrator and Stanley just sitting there.
Yeah,
in
that's
infinite
super interesting.
loop. And you know, I think that exists. That idea exists even in the beginner's guide in one of the prison sequences, where you're supposed to be trapped in there for like 4 hours or like an hour, and Davey just says, "Yeah, you know, Coda wants you to be in this prison for like an hour, but you know that's kind of stupid. So yeah, here you can get out now." And he like lets you out.
Yeah.
And then he says, "Me and Coda would often like kind of debate over whether a video game could even be like this. You know,
Should it be playable or not?
should it be playable or not? You know, does that make it more like a video game or not like a video game?" And exploring that is just mind blowing. Inviting you to be a better gamer.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, Matt.
These games
I know they're amazing. They're amazing. Honestly, I have no nitpicks. I don't think that there's any nitpicks with these games for me.
I don't either, and I think I don't think he's made any other games, but originally in 2019, then in 2020, and now supposedly 2021, they're releasing an ultra deluxe version of Stanley Parable that expands on what they already have, and adds a bunch of new content as well. So
Okay,
I will
awesome.
definitely give Sugar Daddy Reedon, all my money.
Yeah, I'll give him my money too. And for those of you listening to the pod, you could look forward to probably playing that later. But play the Stanley Parable now if you can. Play the Beginner's Guide now. They're not expensive games, and they're just super awesome. So, final conclusive thoughts on the game, Matt. What do you got?
Yes.
Yeah. Go ahead.
We've dissected these games for like an hour now, and it's just this discussion. Like some of our other discussions we've had, it made me like the game less a little bit because I'm like I was looking at it a little bit more critically, maybe.
Yeah.
This has only made me love each game more. They're both phenomenal. They're both a perfect example of video games as art, and
Yeah.
I think anyone that would disagree that video games can be art just needs to play these two games to have their minds changed.
Completely agree. I think my final thoughts, these are fruits and vegetables in video game form. I think they feed your brain the good stuff. They make you think. They challenge you to think, which I think is just so important, especially in this day and age, or in any age, really. And yeah, I mean, there's so many things I didn't even get to get into. I mean, we're already over an hour on the episode, and I can go on forever and ever on like all the different endings of the Stanley Parable, or all the more layers that we can kind of peel off of the Beginner's Guide. But you know, they're so dense with what they got in there. So this double video game episode
like an onion.
It's like an onion.
A lot of layers.
This is the best we can do with this double video game episode. So, Matt, you want to move on to the ratings? Okay. Okay,
All right,
so
we'll do one at a time.
yeah, and let's do Stanley Parable first because it did come out chronologically first.
And to clarify for everyone that's listening for the first time, Lucas and I, we do not discuss our personal ratings.
Nope. Out of 10.
It's out of 10, and then once we each say it on the count of 3, we will then combine our scores to put it in one of our zones, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, okay. Stanley Parable on go, okay? 3, 2, 1, go.
10.
9. Oh, you gave it a 10. Okay, wow.
I have to.
Go ahead.
I was thinking about it, and I didn't have any reason to not give it the only reason I could think of to not give it a 10 is that it is so untraditional. But for me, that wasn't good enough of a reason to not give it a 10, personally.
Yeah, I think it's almost perfect. I wouldn't call it like I and this is just me being critical in my personal opinions of things. I think it's like 9 is great. 9 is great on the Lucas scale, right? 10, there's probably one game that has a 10. So this is the highest I can give it without it being The Witness.
I'm more liberal with my ratings, I think.
Okay, that's fine. Okay, now is the beginner's guide rating?
Yeah.
Okay, on go. 3, 2, 1, go.
10.
9. Ah! Dude, you're crazy. You love Davey Reedon.
I love him, man. He's so. Yeah, the meanings that I was personally able to derive from the beginner's guide, especially like with the altruism stuff I mentioned, and how it's kind of asking you to be like a better human in a way and be a better friend. I thought it was amazing, and I couldn't think of any reason I didn't like it. And there was just so much commentary on like dissecting games, even though by virtue of how the game presents itself, you want to dissect it, but it's kind of against dissecting games. Just there's so much dissonance going on, you know?
Yeah.
And again, same thing as Stanley Parable. The only reason I could maybe not give it a 10 is that it is, at its core, a walking simulator and more untraditional, but that's not a good enough reason for me to knock it down.
Right. Dang, so that puts each of these games at 19. Okay, that's the highest score we've given a game on this podcast. 19 is really high. Matt, what zone does that put us in?
Puts us in the cum zone.
I don't know. It's just so stupid. I love the way you say that. Yep, that's the zone. That's the zone these games are in. So that is an official endorsement from Thanks for Playing about these games. And
phenomenal.
Just amazing stuff. So I think that's all we got today. Matt, you want to tell them where they can find us online?
You can find us online at TFP Podcasts. That's TFP Podcasts with an S on the end, and that is on both Instagram and Twitter. And if you feel compelled to write us an email, maybe get featured on the next episode, like Q&A. You can reach us at thanksforplayingpod@gmail.com. And if you had so much fun with your favorite host, Matt, you can find me on Twitter at GoodIdeaMatthew. And on twitch.tv, where I'll stream occasionally, I'm probably playing games with Lucas, twitch.tv/GoodIdeaMatt.
I think half of the podcast episodes are like us plugging our shit at the end. It feels like such a long outro.
It's fun.
Yeah, if you guys love me, how do you do? I crave validation, right? If you love me, you can follow me on Instagram and Twitter at GoodIdeaLucas, and you could also give me a follow or a sub on Twitch at it's not really at on Twitch. Twitch.tv/GoodIdeaLucas. Hit me with that sub. Don't care if it's a Twitch Prime sub, but hit me with the sub. I would very much appreciate it. And occasionally streaming some Melee with the boys and streaming Valorant with Matt. So I think that's all we got for today, guys.
All right, folks. Catch you next time. Skip it up!